Hey wonderful people, it's Genevieve, and my goal here on this channel is to teach you all about illustration and a little bit of design too. Now if you're regular here, you know that I've been away for a while to take care of my son as well as my health, but this weekend marks the 4th anniversary of the channel, so I had to come back to do a very special video which includes a giveaway as well as a few other surprises sprinkled here and there. But I won't spoil all the fun just yet, so grab your drawing tools and let's get started. Today we're going to draw custom cartoon faces, starting from a blank page and ending with a colored and shaded illustration. Now the channel is 4 years old, and one of the first videos that I made that really picked up was how to draw cartoon faces. Over the years though, my style did evolve, as everyone's does, so I wanted to come back and teach a new and improved version of how to draw cartoon faces, which is a version that I think is even easier and more efficient. So first thing first, we just need somewhere to draw, of course. I'm personally going to do this demo in Procreate on the iPad Pro, but you can follow along with any drawing tool of your choice, even pencil and paper could work. And I know I'm going to get a bunch of questions if I don't specify it, so these are the dimensions I will be using for this demo. It's just the size of the iPad screen, but make sure you pick dimensions that work for your own project requirements. As for the brush you use in this video, it genuinely does not matter. I'm just going to use one, so pick whichever one you liked in your software. A good option in Procreate, a free option that is, would be in the sketching pack that comes with the app, the HB pencil or the 6B pencil. I'm going to be using my favorite brush, so Genevieve's favorite brush, which was launched a few months ago and was a limited edition, but I'm bringing it back just in this video. I wanted to make a more affordable option for people that cannot buy a whole pack, but still want to have a custom, more professional brush, so that brush is exactly it. And the only way to get it is to click on the link in the video description. But okay, with that out of the way, let's actually start drawing. We're going to start with just a simple, super rough circle on the top of the page, which is going to become the cranium. And then we're going to add the jaw below, and that can be any shape of your choice. I like to go with something slightly pointy, but a little bit more round. You can experiment with long jaws, short jaws, something super square, something super round. That's going to help you customize your character a whole lot. Now from there, we're going to indicate which direction our character is looking in, and we're going to indicate that with a slightly curved vertical line. In my case, I'm going to put it a little bit more on the right, but by simply changing the positioning of that vertical line, you're going to be able to change the direction your character is looking in, so you can definitely experiment with that. From there, we're going to add a slightly curved horizontal line that is going to connect the point where the cranium and the jaw meet on both sides. This is what I call the plus sign, and it is super helpful because it helps you quickly visualize the angle your character's face is in. From there, we're going to loosely sketch the eyes. And one fun trick here you can play with, the higher you put the eyes, the older your character is going to tend to look, and inversely, the lower they are, the younger your character is going to look. I usually put mine slightly overlapping with my horizontal line and then almost touching the bottom of my circle. Then we're going to draw the ear. In my case, I just have one because my character is seen 3/4, and the ear is pretty much the same as the eyes and is going to be at the intersection between the cranium and the jaw. From there, we're going to draw a simple nose on the vertical line. I usually go for an inverted U shape. We're also going to add the mouth, which is going to be super simple. I tend to put mine slightly off to one side, and I put it right under the cranium circle. From there, if you want, you can further tweak the shape of the head. I like to create more of a bean shape, so adding this indent here in line with the eyes, which creates a brow bone and a cheek. Nothing fancy, that's just part of my style these days, I guess. And as you can see here, I'm going over some of my lines with just more pressure so that my lines are darker. And it's because at this stage, we've sketched really most of the structural elements of the face and the head. So it is a good idea before we add the hair and more details to just clean up our lines a tiny little bit. This is still a messy sketch. We still want to have a bunch of lines everywhere, but we also want to have a better idea of which lines we will use in the final product. So from there, we're going to add the eyebrows. Of course, they're going to be above the eyes. I like to draw them slightly outwards, and I just draw this super simple shape, which is kind of a sideways, thick comma. And at this point, we're ready to start sketching the hair, which I know is intimidating, but we're going to do it step by step, don't worry. The first thing I like to do is just sketching the part. I'm going to put it off to the left here, but it could be wherever. And then we're going to simply connect the front of the part to the ear. Here I'm going with an S-curve because I want the hair to be a little bit wavy, but you could have a straight line, a super tight S-curve for curly hair, whatever you want, you get to pick the style. Now from there, we're going to draw what I call the helmet shape, which is going to be slightly off the cranium. We want to have some thickness to the hair. So really just get that line of hair away from the cranium, and then same thing as we did when we connected the part to the ear, we're just going to add some very simple curves or straight lines depending on the type of hair we want. So it looks like this big weird helmet. That is totally okay. Once you have that, you can add some length. And you can see here I'm going pretty quickly because I do have 2, 3, maybe 4 tutorials exactly on how to draw different types of hair. So I'm going to link those in the video description if you want a more in-depth cartoon hair drawing explanation based on different hairstyles. For this video, I'm really just going to focus on the basic steps, the last one being covering the front of the face, of course. I used to just draw this big weird line that was kind of part of the helmet shape, but now I had a huge swoop in pretty much every single one of my characters. Again, it's part of the style that evolved. So it's this big S curve, kind of like a toothpaste. You know, the toothpaste on the toothbrush in the commercials, that kind of shape, but right in the forehead. So at this stage, it is normal for your sketch to look super messy. Actually, it's a great thing. Now, before we move on to adding the colors, we're going to double check that everything is exactly how we want by flipping the sketch. So to do that, if you're working in Procreate, you can go in the wrench icon menu. In the canvas sub menu, you can pick flip horizontal. Now, if you're working in a different software, anything that allows you to flip or mirror your image is what you're looking for. You can even just stand in front of the mirror, and by doing that, you're going to see your sketch in a new way, and that's going to allow you to see what works and what doesn't work. So the goal here is just to make sure you're happy with that rough sketch, not in terms of the cleanliness of the sketch, but with the positioning of the different elements. So for example here, I feel like it's just a bit skewed, my illustration, so I'm going to use my error tool or any distort tool that you have in your software. I'm going to set it to distort, and I'm just going to bring it back in line. You can also use this tool just to change the proportions, so I might squish my head down a tiny bit. Yeah, that looks good. And you can also use a different tool, which is the selection tool, to just move specific parts of your piece. So making sure it is on freehand so you can draw around whatever element you want to move. And then if you go back on your arrow tool, you'll be able to reposition the element that you have selected. So here, really make sure you take the time to rework your rough sketch as much as needed for you to be happy with it. It's going to look messy, that's totally okay, but you should be happy with the general structure. The rough sketch is by far the hardest part of this video, so if you can get behind this little section, you're totally going to be able to finish this. The rest is quite easy, it's just like using a coloring book. So feel free to pause the video here. Again, take all the time you need. You can flip back and forth as many times as needed until you're really happy with the positioning and the proportions of everything. Great, so at this stage we're ready to start adding colors, and we're going to focus for now on just basic solid shapes. So we're going to color the face, the hair, and the eyes. Now before we start, it might be helpful to lower the opacity of the sketch, so just tap on the little N and then lower the opacity until you can just barely see it. I'm going to keep mine a little bit darker so you can see it in the video. And you can also change the blending mode of your sketch layer to multiply. So at the top of this list right here, that's just going to make it even easier to see the sketch as you add the colors. Now just for fun, I'm going to bring in the original illustration from my previous tutorial from a few years ago, so I can color pick the colors and just do an updated version of this illustration. That being said, of course, you can use your own colors depending on the character you want to draw. I'm just going to color pick the skin color here because again, I'm going to use it as my reference. And if you want to follow along with me, I'm going to add the color code on the screen so you can input that within your software. Now once you have your colors set up, go ahead and create a new layer under the sketch and rename it to Face. Now we are going to draw the hair later, that is, on top of the face. So for now, just don't worry about the hairline, draw the head and the face itself. And for that, really, all you have to do is draw the outline, because then we can just fill in the shape, which I'm going to show you how to do once we're done with the outline. Now, one thing though here, take the time to draw a nice outline. We were rough and quick in our sketch, but at this stage, we do want to take the time to create nice outlines so we have nice, clean shapes. So once you do have a fully closed in outline, go ahead and drag your color onto the shape. Hold your pencil, and then we're going to adjust the threshold by moving our pencil towards the left and then towards the right until we find the moment right before the color fills in the entire screen. So really nothing more complicated than this for now. Now we're going to add the hair again on top. So go ahead and create a new layer above the face layer and rename that new layer to hair. Here I'm going to once more color pick this purple that I had in my original illustration, but go ahead with any hair color of your choice. And we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to outline the shape and then fill it in. And hair can be very overwhelming. We may want to add a ton of single hair strands. This is not the time and place for it though. Just focus on basic big shapes, and as we add some shadows later and even later some details, this is how we're going to add a bit more of the hair texture. So for now you should think almost like a Lego character. You know, they have this kind of plasticky helmet hair piece that has just very basic, rough, simple shapes for the hair, and then on top of it they paint the texture. So that's kind of what we're doing here. Now, it is one thing to see your sketch. It is a completely different thing to see basic colors as shapes like this. So as you're drawing those big base color blocks, don't hesitate to come back and change them as needed. You want to make sure you like your shapes at this point, not just the lines that were in your sketch. Now, if you're working with a pencil type brush, you're going to have some texture in your outlines. If you're not a fan, you can simply swipe your layer towards the left with one finger, duplicate it, and then when you merge the two layers together, those little tidbits of grain, I guess, or texture are going to disappear. I tend to leave it in my illustrations because it is a way to start building that texture that we're going to work on later in the piece. And at this stage, don't forget to draw your eyebrows. We want them to be, well, usually the same color as the hair, so now's a good time to draw them too. And from there, we're simply going to draw the eyes, so go ahead and create a new layer above everything except for the sketch, rename it to eyes, and we're going to pick a, well, kind of an off-white. I like to go with off-white because I want to be able to add highlights later, and if I was to go with just pure white, I wouldn't be able to do that. Now, if you are working with Procreate, there's a way to create a smooth ellipse, so just create a very rough one first and then hold your pencil on the screen. Procreate is going to smooth it, make it really nice for you. You could also tap with another finger, that would create a perfect circle, but in my case, I just want a normal ellipse. And you can also resize the ellipse. As long as you hold your pencil, you can essentially edit the shape just by dragging your pencil around. It's really fun. I highly encourage you to try it if you haven't before. Next, we're going to draw the irises to add a bit of color and less creepiness to those eyes. So go ahead and create a new layer above the eyes but below the sketch and rename that new layer to irises. So once more here, I'm going to go with the color from my original illustration, that nice green, but you could go with whatever you need. And I'm just drawing pretty much simple circles here. It might be helpful to hide your sketch because there might be just too many lines and you might have moved your stuff too much around that it's just getting confusing. And don't worry too much about the positioning of the ellipses for now. I'm going to show you a really neat trick in just a second. So once you have your irises like this, we're going to open our layer panel and we're going to apply them as a clipping mask on the eyes. So tap on the iris layer and select clipping mask. Now clipping mask is a very standard feature in digital art software, so you should be able to find it in yours. But what it does essentially is now the shape of the irises is going to stay within the shape of the eyes. So you can easily move your irises around to make sure your character is looking exactly in the direction you want it to be looking in. So at this stage, use the same technique to add any other element you might have. So if you have clothing, if you have earrings, whatever, you would add them now. Otherwise, we're going to do the same thing as we did for the sketch. So we're going to flip our canvas around just to make sure we're happy with the positioning of our shapes. As you keep going, it's always good to just readjust, because the further down we get down the road, the harder it is to correct those things. So might as well take the time to do it now. We're also going to group all of the color layers we have so far, so you can just swipe them towards the right in Procreate and then tap the group icon at the top and rename this group to base colors. Awesome, so let's bring this piece to life, shall we? So I know this section is called shadows, but we're going to start by adding some, color variation in the hair, which is totally optional, but it's such a quick and easy way to completely transform your piece. So go ahead and use the selection tool, still set to freehand, and draw a blob towards the bottom piece of your hair. So it doesn't need to be anything specific, just a general blob. And then select the feather here at the bottom and set the amount anywhere between 20 and 50%. It is something you can experiment with. It is not an exact science, but adding this feather is going to create a gradient in your selection. From there, if you go in the adjustment panel, select hue, saturation, and brightness, you're going to have these selectors at the bottom that are going to allow you to create the gradient. So I'm going to move the hue a little bit towards the right and the brightness towards the right as well, which is going to give me this nice pink. But feel free to go ahead and experiment here. It's all about creating your own gradient. Now I went a bit quickly, so I'll do it again with a section on the top. So just using my selection tool, drawing whatever shape I want, and then creating a feather to have a gradient in my selection, probably a smaller amount this time because it's a smaller shape. Then selecting hue, saturation, and brightness in the adjustment panel and moving the hue towards the opposite side to get more of a bluish purple this time. And I might lower the brightness a bit to create some sort of a root shadow, essentially in my character's hair. And obviously this is a technique that you can use for anything. It doesn't have to be just for hair. It's a super quick way to add more interest to your illustrations. That being said, let's start adding real shadows. So go ahead and create a new layer above everything you have so far in your base color group and rename it to eye shadow. Not the makeup, just an actual shadow in the eye. We're also going to apply it as a clipping mask onto our eye shape. And we're going to pick here the blending mode multiply, which is actually at the top of the list. I don't know where I'm going downward. And we're going to lower the opacity around 50% for now. As for the color, pick anything you want except for anything like gray or black, because your shadows are going to look muddy if you do that. So just add a little bit of color. I usually go with a grayish purple, which is going to work really well for the hair that I have in this illustration. And all we're going to do is we're going to draw this kind of diagonal shadow at the top of the eyes, which I know sounds crazy, but that's just something that I feel really brings the eyes to life and the whole character to life, actually. So once you have it mapped out, you can go back and just play with the opacity until you're super happy with it. I'm going to lower mine probably around 30%. Again, not an exact science, just whatever works for you is what's going to work for you. You can also, if you're working with my favorite brush, tilt your Apple Pencil and draw with the side, and that's going to help you blend in that shadow a little bit. Otherwise, you can just leave it as is, no worries. One thing I do recommend doing though is grouping every layer that is related to the eye so that we can easily move them around as needed. And then of course renaming that group to eyes, just so we can keep our file clean and organized. Then we're going to just add the general shadows. So go ahead and create a new layer above your base color group and rename it to shadows. Just like for the eyes, we're going to use the blending mode multiply at the very top, and we're going to for now set the opacity around 50%. So what I like to do here in terms of the shadows is just reactivate my sketch and see which lines are missing for my character to be more easily understood. So what I mean by that is I used to draw outlines everywhere, and then add my shadows, but I try to not have as many outlines these days. So what I do is I use my shadows as a way to differentiate between different elements. For example, here it was mostly the hair. The front of the hair was just melting in the back of the hair. So I'm going to add a big shadow there that is going to help me differentiate the front from the back. Now, if you're a complete beginner, that might feel a little bit overwhelming, and that's totally okay. You can just forget that last little minute or so of me talking. And when we add outlines later, you can just add outlines everywhere. That is totally okay. It's a great way to start. Nothing wrong with outlines. It's just something that evolved with my style again over the last, 2-3 years. And so I thought I'd share it with you. But it's really not a huge deal. That being said, once we're done using the outlines, or the shadows, sorry, to mimic outlines, we're going to use shadows to mimic volume. And those are going to depend on your character, of course, but I'm going to quickly show you what I do. So I add one here, as you can see, on the right side, kind of behind the forehead, on the hair, to add volume there. And then one that I really like to add as well is under that toothpaste swoop that we have on the forehead, to really separate the hair from the head, but also add a little bit of that shadow on the hair itself so that the hair looks really poofy in 3D. And I like to do a combination of just filling in big shapes with color drop and then coming back in and softening some of the edges with a more natural drawing, like the actual stroke of the pencil, to add some of that texture that I keep referring to. And from there, we're going to work on the big shape that we have for the hair to make it look more like hair. And the first thing I recommend doing is just adding single lines to create clumps of hair. So again, straight hair would just be straight lines. Wavy hair, you can have C curves or long S curves. And curly hair, you would have spirals instead. So really simple for now, just mapping out these basic shapes to define the hair a little bit more. And then once that is done, it's really easy to add some volume to the hair. So one thing I like to do first is, if I can see one ear or two ears, I add a shadow underneath. And then you're just going to look at your lines and you're going to add shadows between some of the lines, which is going to help separate the clumps and make it look like some are in front and some are in the back. One fun thing you can do as well is set your eraser to the same brush you are using to paint, and then use that eraser to add some hair strands within the shadows. So it's a great way, again, to just add more texture and more interest to the piece super easily and quickly. If you do choose to use the eraser to add some hairlines, or I should say hair strands, make sure that the size of the eraser is similar to the size of your paintbrush, just so that the style is consistent. And believe it or not, that's pretty much all I do for my shadows these days. So feel free to pause the video, take all the time you need to work on your shadows in your piece, and then we're going to come back and we're going to bring this illustration together by adding some outlines and details. So let's jump in right with the obvious thing, the facial features that we're missing, like the nose and the mouth. So go ahead and create a new layer above everything you have except for the sketch, and rename that new layer to Face Details. Here I like to just pick a much darker version of my skin color. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. But don't worry about it too much for now. We can adjust it later as we start adding the details. So as long as you have something you can see, you're good for now. Now we're going to zoom onto the ear and we're going to draw this inverted 5 shape, I guess. So it's one curve like this and then one curve like this. Super simple. And just to crisp it up, we might also add a bit of an outline here on the top of the ear. There we're going to move on to the nose, which I keep super simple as well. I just like to do an inverted U shape like we have in the sketch, but you could have something completely different. So it's super quick here. Feel free to experiment with different shapes until you have a nose that you're really happy with. And as you can see here, instead of erasing, I undo and redraw my line. And that's something I highly encourage you to try as well whenever you're drawing outlines or details like these. Just because if you erase and start from like the middle of your line, it's going to be hard to have a line that flows well, and it's going to look slightly off. It's also going to take longer, believe it or not. So you're always better to just undo and redraw your line until you're super happy with it. Now, as you can see, I also added the mouth while I was rambling, so super simple U shape. But this is also something you can customize to completely transform your illustration. I also like to add a line on the side of the face that is not overlapping the hair, just to define it well or separate it well from the background. And then once you do have your outlines and face details, it's really easy to change their color. You can just pick a different color and drop it over it. So for example, I feel like the mouth is too light, so I'm just going to pick a slightly darker brown and drop my color over the mouth, which is going to help it pop a little bit more. Now, one thing we desperately need is some outlines around the eyes, so we're going to create that within the base color eye group. So at the very top of everything we have in that eye group, a new layer, rename that new layer to eyelashes. It doesn't mean we're going to draw big eyelashes, but just the shape itself is eyelashes. And here I recommend going with just a darker version of your hair color. So I'm going to go with a darker purple. And I personally like to leave the inner corners, not that they're corners, but you know what I mean. I like to leave those open and just draw an outline on the outer section of the eyes. And you may want to thicken the top section just to make it a little bit more interesting. Now, in terms of the actual eyelashes, you could just forgo them altogether, add a little triangle as I'm doing here, add many little triangles, a bunch of different lines. It is such an easy way to customize your character because it is very simple shapes, but it can totally become a huge part of your signature look and style. And you may here have an overlap between your face details and eyelashes, so make sure you erase that if that's the case. Now, just like we did for the face, we're going to add some hair details. So go ahead and create a new layer under the shadows this time. That's a personal preference. It could be above if you want. And rename that new layer to hair details. I like to color pick the darkest part of my hair, so probably in a shadow area, and then just test that, see how it looks. Again, it doesn't need to be exact because we can change it later, but you just want to have something that you're going to see really well. And then I usually start by outlining the bottom part of the eyebrows. And then I add a few slightly curved vertical lines. Now for the hair itself, I recommend starting with the outline for the general shape and then coming back in and adding extra hair strands where you see fit. But the thing here is it's easy to get carried away. So I would say maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 hair strands per hair clump is all you need, not more than that. So while you're working on this, let's talk a little bit about the giveaway. Now, to really celebrate, we're going to have 3 different prizes, or I guess 3 different tiers of prizes. So tier 1 is going to be for 3 winners, and it's going to be my Ultimate Illustration Bundle, which is a collection of brushes for Procreate that are the brushes I personally use whenever I work on children's books or any professional illustration projects. Tier 2 is going to be for 2 winners, and it is going to be my Mega Bundle, which includes all the brushes on my online store, brushes for Procreate that is, and it has a value of over $180. And finally, the grand prize is going to be the Mega Bundle, as well as my illustration course, Illustration from Scratch, and those 2 things together have a value of over $500, and there's going to be one lucky winner who's going to get this price. Now, if you already purchased any of those items before, so the brushes or the course, whether it is today while watching the video or 4 years ago, and you still want to enter the giveaway, please go ahead. If you win, I will just refund your past purchase no matter how long ago it was. I really want the giveaway to be as fair as possible, so I want to make sure everyone, including people who supported me in the past, are able to enter and can still win no matter what. Speaking of which, the way to enter the giveaway, super simple. Step 1 is make sure you are subscribed to this channel. And then step 2, leave a comment under this video letting me know which one of my tutorials from the past years, except for this one of course, has been your favorite. And that's it. That's all you have to do. I will pick the winners at random through the people that left a comment and are also subscribed to the channel. I think that's all the info for the giveaway, but if you have any question, make sure to check the video description because I'm going to write all the details about the giveaway, including the dates and stuff like that in there. And there may or may not be a custom illustration giveaway on Instagram, so make sure you head over there to enter that as well. And then as promised, it's easy to change the color of those lines. You could either color drop if you want, or you could use the same technique we used to add the gradients, so adjustment panel, hue, saturation, and brightness, and then you can change the color that way. If you're working in a different software, any kind of color adjustment layer you have would work. Hue, saturation, and brightness is a very common one, so you should be able to find it in your software as well. Now from there, one other detail I like to add, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I still like it, it's a bit of an outline on the irises. So I'm going to do it. I feel like it really helps everything pop. So I'm going to go directly on my iris layer. And in order for everything to stay within the shape that's already there, I'm going to swipe my layer with 2 fingers, which is going to activate Alpha Lock. You can also activate it by tapping on the layer and just selecting Alpha Lock from the menu. Then I'm going to color pick the darkest part of the eye, so the one that is in the shadow, and I'm going to use that to outline the top of the iris and maybe a tiny bit of the bottom as well, but leaving some parts open, just like I did for the eyelashes. And one general illustration pro tip is to add your details and textures where you want people to look at the most. And so here you can see I'm adding some of those strokes within the eyeshadow, which is going to help reinforce the shadow, number one, but it's also going to add more detail and texture within the eyes, which as humans we are wired to look for. So this is a trick again that you can use in all your illustrations. Don't try to add details and textures everywhere. Add them where you want the people to look at. So with that idea in mind, we're going to add some pink in the middle of the face to draw the attention there even more. So go ahead and create a new layer above the face and rename that new layer to cheeks. Now we want that color to stay within the face, so we're going to apply the layer as a clipping mask. And then you can color pick the color you use for the skin, and we're just going to quickly make it a little bit more pink, but we're going to tweak it later. So just pick something super rough for now. It doesn't matter, it's not a big deal. And then we're going to start by gently brushing over the ear and the cheeks. If you are using my brush and an Apple pencil, if you tilt the pencil, it's going to allow you to have that nice big soft texture. If you're working with a different brush and or a different stylus, you might need to increase the size of your brush. Otherwise, you're just going to brush here, as you can see, on the cheeks, just like if you were to add some blush, as well as above the nose to kind of mimic almost like a sunburn. And then you can add the same type of sketch lines as we did in the eyeshadows on the nose itself. Now, this is something you want to make sure it looks good, so take the time to refine it as much as needed, so you can go back and forth between the paintbrush and the eraser to make sure you're really happy with the shape and how it blends with the rest of the face. And once you are happy with the shape, as I promised, we're going to tweak the color. So same thing as we did for the hair details. You can use any kind of color adjustment layer you have in your software. So in my case, I'm using Procreate, so I'm going in the adjustment menu and picking hue, saturation, and brightness. Just again, playing with the settings until you find something you like. This is such a helpful tool, not having to have a set color palette and just tweaking it as you go. So helpful. You can obviously play with opacity and the blending modes as well. I'm going to keep mine as is. Now the next thing we're going to do is going to completely transform the whole piece, and it is super easy. We're going to add some highlights. So go ahead and create a new layer above your base color group, but below everything else. And rename that new layer to highlights. And here we're going to use the blending mode add. Now add is very, very strong, so you may want to lower the opacity for now. I like to set it around 20%, just to get a rough idea of what I'm doing first. And the color, again, totally up to you, depends on your piece. In this case, I'm just going to go with a bright yellow because this is just a floating head on a white background. Now there's so many different ways to add lights. I'm going to pretend mine is on the top right. And so every element, or I guess on the top right side of every element, I should say, I'm going to add this bright line. This is such a big part of my style. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know this technique. I call it outlining my outlines. You don't have to add your highlights this way. You could add them more like shadows, so focusing on the volume. But I find this is such a quick way to add highlights, and it completely, again, transforms everything. It makes the character pop, it makes the hair pop. So I'm definitely going to do that. And I also like to add some extra highlights on the cheeks and some bits of the hair. And so the cheeks, I just draw these little dots, sometimes just one per cheek, sometimes a group of 3. It depends on how big my character is. And yeah, again, super simple. It's not realistic in any way, but it really brings the face to life. Now, before moving on to the hair, I'm just going to bring the opacity a little bit higher so I can see my highlights better. Again, it's going to depend on your own piece, so adjust as needed. And then I'm going to add some highlights within the hair, so focusing on the same technique as for the face, meaning any shape that is facing my light source, which in my case was on the top right, could be different for yours. And then adding some extra little lines and dots where I want even more texture and volume. Just like for the hair details, you don't want to overdo this. So 1, 2, maybe 3 highlights line per clumps, and maybe between 2 and 5 groups of highlight dots on the whole head. And we are so close to the finish line, but the last few elements we have completely transformed the piece. The first one is we're going to add some highlights on the eyes themselves. So go ahead and create a new layer above everything you have within your eyes group. That is not true, below the eyelashes but above everything else, and rename that new layer to eye highlights. We want those highlights to be the brightest color of the piece, so go ahead and just pick pure white. And then just to make sure they stay within the eye shape, we're going to also apply the layer as a clipping mask. Optional, but might as well. You could have one big dot, you could have 2 dots that are posing on either side of the irises or both sides of the irises. I like to have these open ovals on the lower side that is in the shadow. It makes no sense with the physics of light, but that's where I like having them, so that's where I put them. And the very last thing we're going to do is add some texture in the form of freckles. They're not really freckles, but I guess that's what I'm going to call them just for the sake of clarity. So go ahead and create a new layer above your base colors and rename that new layer to freckles. And here I'm just going to pick usually the color that I use for the hair. I find it's a nice way to tie the hair with the face. So I'm going to color pick my purple. And you could draw the freckles one by one. That being said, if you do have one of my bundles, which is called the Ultimate Illustration Bundle, I will link it in the video description below, of course. There is a freckles brush that you can use that has some different shapes and different sizes of freckles, so it's just a little bit faster. But you could totally just draw every dot individually. And we're going to place them over where we have our pink. So again, we want to use these dots as a way to add texture and interest in the middle part of the face, which is where we want to draw the attention of the viewer. Now you could leave them as is. I like to play with different blending modes, so just scrolling through the list and seeing what you like here. Again, it is not exact science. I've said this thing so many times in the video, but that's just the truth. With illustrations, experiment and see what you like. I don't think I'm going to keep it, but for now I set it to color burn. And then you can come back in with your eraser and erase any dots that would be over the eyes, because that's a bit weird. But you have some that fly around the face on the hair and stuff like that. I usually keep those. I think it's kind of nice. And the very last thing we're going to do is add some freckles, but bright. So go ahead and create a new layer above your freckles layer. And if I can tap on the name, rename your layer to sparkles. So here you may want to set the blending mode to something like color dodge, add something that is going to make your color brighter, and just same thing otherwise. You're going to use your paintbrush. My gosh, I can't tap anymore. It's the sign I've been filming for too long and this tutorial needs to end. But yes, you're going to put those sparkles on the same area as where you put your freckles and your cheek highlights. You can also, if you want, add some on the hair just for added interest. Don't overdo it. I feel like for the hair, that's been the name of the game in this video, don't overdo it, but it's really true. It's so easy to overdo the hair, but just adding a few of those sparkles can help bring more interest to the hair, make them feel more polished without spending too much time, but also it helps match the texture of the face to the hair and make the whole illustration feel more coherent. And there you go. Once you're done, you can simply tap on the wrench icon menu and the share submenu. You can pick something like JPEG or PNG and then save your image in your camera roll so you can share it on Instagram, Facebook, or just keep it for yourself. If you enjoyed this video and want more cartoon drawing tutorials, I highly recommend you check out this playlist because I have a bunch more videos for you. But before you leave, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because I'm going to be posting more, hopefully, in the very near future. Then click on the playlist link right here and I'll meet you there.